Hello, everyone. A good day and a very, very warm welcome to the joint AFI BFFI virtual peer-to-peer learning on practical tools for policymakers, financial inclusion for persons with disabilities. My name is Vidya Raman. I'm a policy specialist at the Policy Analysis and Guidance team at AFI, and I'll be supporting today's virtual event. I'm a woman in my mid-30s with brown complexion and long, very curly hair. I'm wearing a white silk top today. I have a calm, lower toned voice, and I tend to smile a lot when I speak. We're delighted to have you all join us today. Regulators, policymakers, developmental partners, and representatives of organizations of persons with disabilities, all united by a shared goal of advancing disability inclusive finance. Next slide, please. Thanks, Lucy. So before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. Feel free to use the interactive chat to share comments or questions throughout the session. You can also use the raise hand feature if you wish to contribute directly. And finally, the Q&A box will remain open. We encourage you to post your questions there anytime during the session. Now we'll move on to the agenda overview. We have a very exciting 2-hour program ahead, featuring diverse perspectives from practitioners, regulators, fintech innovators, and persons with lived experiences. After the welcome remarks, we'll start with a session on practical methodologies for disability inclusive finance, led by our partners for this event from the Barrier Free Finance Initiative, who's going to share practical tools and frameworks for policymakers. Next, we will hear about regulatory and fintech approaches to disability inclusion, featuring insights from the Reserve Bank of Fiji, our AFI member, and Shop Okoa, one of AFI's Inclusive FinTech Showcase winners this year. And then comes the most exciting part of today's session, the segment on lived experiences, barriers, and solutions. In this part, persons with disabilities ranging from intellectual to physical disability will share firsthand challenges that they faced themselves in accessing financial services. This will then be followed by responses from the Bank of Ghana and the Central Bank of Egypt. We will then open up the floor to all participants, so please be ready to share your reflections, examples, solutions, and challenges to develop and implement policies that support PWDs from your own context. It's a great opportunity for an open peer-to-peer exchange. Then we'll wrap up with some brief reflections before closing at 14 UTC. Now it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Robin Newnham, who is the Head of Policy Analysis and Guidance at AFI, to deliver the welcome remarks. Robin leads AFI's work on disadvantaged groups, including persons with disabilities. Robin, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Vidya, for the introduction, and a very warm welcome to all of the AFI members, to the organizations of persons with disabilities joining today, and of course to all of our partners for participating in today's policy webinar on the financial inclusion of people with disabilities. As you've heard, my name is Robin Newnham, and I work together with Vidya in the Policy Analysis and Guidance Unit within AFI. A quick visual description for accessibility purposes. I'm an adult male in my 40s with short dark hair, wearing a beige jacket over a checked shirt. And I have a virtual background behind me displaying the AFI logo. Now, the work of the Policy Analysis Unit in AFI really focuses on generating meaningful and practical policy insights for our financial regulator and policymaker membership from 90 and more countries. And we're especially committed to ensuring that our policy conversations really do reflect the lived experiences of disadvantaged individuals and communities, including, of course, people with disabilities. So I'm grateful to everyone joining this session, and of course, especially to the excellent lineup of speakers we'll be hearing from today. At the outset, I'd like to especially appreciate our partnership with the Barrier-Free Finance Initiative, BFFI, who of course are our co-hosts for today's webinar. This has really been an excellent partnership that's developed over the last 2 years or so, and it's helped to ensure that AFI's work on inclusion of PWDs is well informed, is participatory, and also is technically robust. So thank you very much, Paul and Alison, and we look forward to hearing from both of you shortly. AFI's journey on the inclusion of PWDs really began some 6 years back now with the adoption of the 2019 Kigali Statement by the whole membership on the occasion of the Global Policy Forum held in Rwanda that year. And the Kigali Statement committed members to targeted strategies and policies to ensure disadvantaged groups, including PWDs, are well represented within their financial inclusion efforts and reflect the sentiment that no one should be left behind when we strive for more equitable financial systems. Since then, we've taken a number of additional steps as a network, including an AFI special report on financial inclusion of PWDs published in 2023. And we've sought to advance peer learning throughout the membership, building on the experiences of several pioneering member institutions who have already started to develop national policies for PWD financial inclusion. And today we'll continue this peer learning. We'll hear examples from Fiji, from Ghana, from Egypt, and also a presentation from one of our inclusive fintech finalists this year, Shop Okwa from Kenya, on their work to support students with disabilities. But earlier this year, AFI's also taken an additional step further in the journey by joining a joint commitment for the financial inclusion of PWDs at the Global Disability Summit held in April. So here we have joined hands with BFFI, of course, but also with the European Microfinance Platform, with Humanity and Inclusion, with the Grameen Foundation, and with the World Food Programme. And together we made the first ever collective pledge of time-bound actions on the financial inclusion of PWDs under the Global Disability Summit framework. And as a follow-up to this commitment, just last month in October, AFI was pleased to also participate in the post-GDS regional workshop in Bangkok, which was co-hosted by the International Disability Association, the ASEAN Disability Forum, and also BMZ Germany. And this event really emphasized the need for stronger representation of PWDs in policy platforms. And that's been a key inspiration for today's session and how we've organized the agenda. So later on today, during the lived experiences segment of the webinar, we'll be hearing directly from PWDs on the barriers that they face every single day in accessing financial services. And we'd really like to show our appreciation, especially for all of the speakers that we'll be hearing from in this session. So with this, I'd like to encourage all the participants to make this interactive participatory session. You're very welcome indeed to engage, to share your own reflections, to respond to the issues raised, and to ask questions of our speakers. So without further ado, I wish us good deliberations today on this very critical topic, and I'll pass you back to Vidya to introduce the next segment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that very, very warm and very good welcome remarks and highlighting the importance of this topic. Next, I would like to introduce you into our first segment for today, which is on practical methodologies for disability inclusive finance. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Sureau, who's the co-founder of the Barrier-Free Finance Initiative. Paul, over to you.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. And Robin, thank you for the warm welcome and introduction of our partnership. It has been a great journey with AFI. Next slide, please. So my name is Paul Suro. I'm co-founder of the Barrier Free Finance Initiative. I'm actually a white male with short brown hair. Today, I am wearing a gray shirt, and behind me there is a virtual background with the logo of our initiative, and as well as the logo for the Leave No One Behind commitment of the FDGs. Something you cannot see on screen, but I'm very comfortably seated in my wheelchair. Next slide, please. So today I like to speak, as introduced, about methodologies we have designed and that we are rolling in partnership with AFI to advance the financial inclusion of people with disabilities in light of regulatory work and national financial inclusion policy. But maybe before starting, I'd like to briefly get a sense on the background. What exactly is the systemic exclusion of people with disability? What is people with disabilities? Then I will move to very briefly introduce our work globally, and then moving into practical tools and methodologies, especially designed for regulatory authorities. So people with disabilities, I think something which is it's key to mention is the approach, how we should approach disability, and this is through the social model of disability. The social model of disability, it's nicely defined in the United Nations Conventions on the Right of People with Disabilities, which defines disability as the intersection between impairments, whether they can be mobility impairments, sensory impairments, mental impairments, or intellectual impairments that interact with the barriers in societies that will impede people with disability from being treated equally in society. People with disabilities represent 16% of the world population, and 80% lives in developing countries. In those countries, 75% of people with disabilities are actually women with disabilities. The systemic exclusion of people with disabilities is grounded in, firstly, social norms that are adverse to people with disabilities and discrimination. There are also a characteristic of this exclusion, it's a clear lack of access to basic services, whether it is a lack of access to health, to education, to transport, to technology, and also to financial services. These compounded adverse characteristic leads to low self-esteem and confidence, lower literacy, but also leads to legal barriers, exclusion from the digital um, revolution, if we can say like this, and obviously economic exclusion. So this lower literacy, whether it is financial literacy, digital literacy, added with lack of collateral and the informal employment and livelihood characteristics of people with disabilities leads to financial inclusion. Next slide, please. So when we go a bit more into details about the financial exclusion of people with disabilities, we can look at it in two layers. First layer is at the ecosystem level. Firstly, there is a lack of awareness from financial sector stakeholders about the needs, the capabilities, and the behaviors of people with disabilities in using financial services. This lack of awareness is compounded or yeah, by a lack of data about, as I said, these usages, um, numbers explaining levels of financial inclusion of people with disabilities. Another key characteristic of let's say this lack of planning in financial inclusion is a lack of interaction between the disability sector and the financial inclusion sector, which leads to a lack of knowledge and expertise to be able to plan for people with disabilities, which leads to limited policy and regulatory framework that could incentivize financial institutions and different actors to plan for disability inclusion. At the financial services level, this barrier, and very, let's say, briefly, includes physical inaccessibility, so branches, ATMs, point of services that are not accessible, the digital accessibility, which is non-accessible, and digital accessibility has the potential to remove many barriers, especially physical barriers. But if those platforms are not accessible, then it will create additional barriers, which interacts with also digital lack of digital preparedness and access to digital tools from people with disabilities. Another key barrier is the lack of information and delivery channel in formats accessible for people with disabilities, in particular, people with sensory impairments and cognitive impairments. And finally, and probably the most important barrier is the lack of, or let's say, social and the attitude of staff from financial institution that have misconception um, and stereotypes about people with disabilities that, for example, people with disabilities are riskier clients than other or people without disabilities. Next slide, please. So based on these problem statements, Alison and I and other colleagues have created the Barrier Free Finance Initiative, which is a Luxembourgish nonprofit um, created to advance the economic inclusion of people with disabilities through an equitable access to financial services. So our mission is to provide solution for inclusive finance actors that can combine education and advocacy and awareness raising, information generation and data generation research, and technical assistance to support plans in embedding disability inclusion in financial services. What we aim for is for actors to be aware and engage in disability inclusion, for to identify disability inclusion gaps, whether it is at the level of a financial services provider or a financial inclusion policy, and to issue strategic recommendation to move towards embedding disability inclusion, aiming at working on the supply side so that financial services providers can adapt their product, their services, their infrastructure to be disability inclusive. Another key goal that we have is to share this knowledge, document these practices and those pilots, to share these experiences and incentivize order to plan for disability inclusion. Next slide, please. So concretely, these three pillars, education, intelligence, and technical assistance, we deliver them at two levels. First level on the right side of the screen, there is the market level. So central banks and regulators, investors, industry association, all the ecosystem around financial inclusion. So we aim at creating stakeholder engagement through communication campaign, through workshops, webinars, and activities like the one today, so we can generate this stakeholder engagement. Actually, on that end, we are creating a community of practice. I'll speak a bit more about this initiative later during the presentation. We also have developed, and again, I will develop this a bit more in the next slides, a country assessment methodology aiming at formulating or assisting the formulations of inclusive financial inclusion policies. This methodology, again, I will discuss it a bit more in details, includes research with people with disabilities, with their representative organizations and FSPs to have a broader understanding of the whole financial inclusion landscape. Finally, we support the implementations of these policies and create frameworks and sector guidelines to drive the financial inclusion of people with disabilities within the sector. At the organization level, so FSPs, we also have developed a methodology that includes training for the leadership because we need strong commitment from the leadership, but also trainings for different staff at different level of the organization. This methodology includes assessments, so using tools like self-assessment tools, disability inclusion scorecard, aiming at identifying gaps and building or co-creating disability inclusion plans within the organization. And then we support the organization to implement those plans through trainings, through tools, and through partnerships with local organization of people with disabilities. The idea of all this approach is really to drive a systemic change within the whole ecosystem, whether it is at country level or at regional level. Next slide, please. So about our methodology, what we call the country assessment methodology, but again, with a clear focus on analyzing the current state of the legal framework for financial inclusion. The idea or the main goal is to generate evidence on the status of financial inclusion of people with disabilities so that we can create awareness, advocacy, and especially drive policy formulation at country level. This is done in two steps. Firstly, the country profile, aiming at creating an assessment, high-level assessment of the landscape so that we can understand the preconditions for the financial inclusion of people with disabilities using a framework that I will briefly introduce a bit later. And to provide, so in this country profile, the trends, the gaps, and the recommendation for policy formulation. The second steps is getting a bit more in depth into the analysis so that we can better understand people with disability usage of financial services, but also creating baseline at FSP level to going further in recommending strategies and action for regulators to embed disability inclusion in their policies. So again, here we will get a deep understanding of the needs and capabilities and behavior of people with disabilities and analyze the readiness of financial services providers. Next slide, please. So this is getting a bit more into detail into the methodology. So again, the country profile, it's mainly done, we can say in distance. We don't need to be on site. It's based on desk research, and the aim is to create a stakeholder mapping on all different stakeholders involved in disability inclusion for policy formulation using activities such as key informant interviews, benchmarking, and so on. Then the second step, again, getting a bit more into detail, we will involve more the different actors on site as organization of people with disabilities, person with disabilities, having activities such as focus group discussions and surveys, which will really enable us to have a clear understanding of the needs of the usage and the gaps so that we can create this recommendation for policy formulation. Across the different activities, we organize training sessions so that the different actors can, you know, be aware of disability awareness, disability inclusion concepts and approaches, but also to foster a collaboration between these two sectors, as this is clearly a issue that we have that we have. Next slide, please. So this is the framework I was talking about that we use for the country profile. Uh, Again, here we look at the intersection between what is disability rights and financial inclusion policies, understanding with the idea to identify the gaps. So we have five dimensions. Firstly, looking into legal and policy frameworks, the the implementation mechanisms, the different accessibility frameworks, and again, general national policies about accessibility, data collection and reporting, as this is key information to be able to plan effectively for disability inclusion, and the participation of PWDs within the national landscape. These frameworks enable us to create a baseline so that we can evaluate changes as we implement the strategies. And it also useful to compare different countries and legal frameworks. Next slide, please. So getting a bit more into the future plans, we say. So with Vidya and Robin team, we have formulated a project aiming at creating a policy toolkit. So the idea is to use this methodology that I just described and to roll it out with 3 to 5 regulatory bodies so that we can, create a good baseline, a good understanding of um, the gaps, but also the policies with the roadmaps that we can create with the partners. And here, the idea again is to create an initial policy guidance that could be replicated among the different AFI members and regulatory bodies. Once we have this policy roadmap, we move to implementation support, which is concretely to assist regulatory bodies in embedding a disability inclusion within their operation, mainly using trainings, but also tools so that you can build expertise internally in embedding disability inclusion. And finally, the next step will be to create this policy toolkit, to share lessons learned, and to, well, monitor and continue the development of those financial inclusion policies embedding disability inclusion. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry for that. But in short, here, what I wanted to present is basically the different topics that we should address to create a best practice um, financial inclusion policy that includes disability inclusion. So in all those topics, we have created, or we are in process of creating training sessions that will look into data collection, how to disaggregate data about people with disabilities and how to collect this data, employment of people with disabilities. So this, obviously, I guess the uh, saying that leading by example, it's key when we want to enter into a new topic. So it applies internally to the regulatory bodies, but also to the policies so that we can mandate your FSPs to implement this action. So employment of people with disability that can champion disability inclusion internally within the organizations, but also create a good internal dynamic with different perspective, problem-solving skills, and so on. Staff trainings, as I said, key to remove the barrier linked to discrimination and stigmas of people with disabilities, and then linked to accessibility requirements, whether it is in information, digital accessibility, and physical accessibility. Accessible KYC, I guess we will hear a bit about this when we hear with the live experience of people with disabilities. In many instances, people with disability needs other ways of just signing off, fingerprinting a contract, using, for example, caregivers or alternative KYC mechanisms. Customer relation, customer protection, key staff to be able to communicate with people with disabilities, and also about planning for inclusive product and services, and yes, and so that's the key topics that we will address during this implementation. The next slide, please, and that will be one. Hopefully, I'm still on time. So I wanted to briefly mention, so everything that we produce, we aim at sharing it within a community of practice, whether it is the event that we organize either in person or through virtually, aiming at creating knowledge that can be shared to build this expertise internally. So we have a resource center, we will build a resource center, having key interviews of experts in the field, blog posts, and so on. We also aim at having collaborative forums and working groups linked to specific topics in disability inclusion, for example, in digital accessibility or employment of people with disabilities. And also, and I'm glad Afi has planned in this webinar to give space for people with disabilities to speak about their challenges in accessing financial services. The idea is really to amplify the voice of people with disabilities so that we can hear from the field, hear from the challenges, and address those challenges. So please feel free to scan the QR code so that you can register or pre-register for this community of practice. And I think that's it for me for now. So please feel free to ask any question. More than open and happy to answer them. And thank you very much for your time. So is there any questions at this stage? Otherwise, really feel free later during the discussion to get back to anything that wasn't clear or any question.
Yeah, okay. Hi. Thank you so much, Paul, for that presentation. I'm just going to ask one more time to participants, if there's any question you would like to ask Paul right now, don't be shy. Feel free to raise your hand, or you can even put your question in the chat. Or as Paul mentioned, he can answer the questions at a later stage today. So there's no questions. Perhaps we can move on. Thank you very much, Paul. Oh, there's a question from Leonard. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me? All right, so
Yes.
yes, okay. So thank you so much, Paul, for your presentation. Yeah, and then it's something that is really of interest to us. I'm speaking on behalf of BCO as a central bank, attending this timely session because we've just issued and adopted our revised national, regional financial inclusion strategy as of April 2025. And there's, as part of the innovative elements of our new strategy, is the insertion of the person with disabilities, which was not, considered in the previous regional strategy. And for us, because we thought that this is something we need to really consider with attention. And that's why I was just mentioning that this workshop is timely, and we did want to to gain knowledge on how to properly address this, although it is part of the our targets, but really how to address it, knowing that we don't have maybe PWD's related data. So I think sharing information on peer learning from others, especially your organization, will be of interest to us, to know more in how to really come up with in terms of framework, because I'm speaking of the from the regulatory standpoint, how to concretely set up a strategy or a policy to deal with this target group, instead of just having this just mentioned in our strategy. So this is a comment, and we'll be more open to learn more in terms of practically how to go about this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leonard. Remind me which country are you coming from?
From the BCO, West African State Central Bank.
Oh, yes.
BCO, yes. HQ
Yes,
in Dakar, Senegal, yeah.
Yeah, I met one of your colleagues recently at the African Inclusive Finance Week in Nairobi. Well, thank you for your intervention. I think so. Something maybe I didn't pointed enough. I think a good way to start, it's obviously to partner with local organization of people with disabilities. You definitely mentioned the lack of data. I think they can help, and we can assist obviously in getting information through surveys, through field group discussion about their needs, and also about the let's say the scale of the issue. I think when I was studying a bit the current state of disability inclusion in the African continent, um, numbers, are definitely underestimated. So being able to get closer from the community, it's important really to understand the scale of the issue. As mentioned during the discussion, my presentation, I mean, we have created a structured approach so that step by step we can assist you in creating this or embedding this disability inclusion within your national financial inclusion strategy. So look, happy to get a bit more in a deeper conversation on a one-to-one basis. But again, I think the structure we have it here. It's a matter then to analyze the different framework that are already in place in the different country of the BCO, and advance toward integrating disability inclusion.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, is there any more questions for Paul? All right. Thank you so much, Paul, for that very interesting presentation. We'll love to hear back from you shortly. Okay, our next presenter, she's having a bit of connectivity issues at the moment. So I think we're going to jump ahead to our FinTech representative, who will now be the first presenter for this segment. So if we just skip right ahead. Thank you, Lucy. Okay, wonderful. Perfect. Okay, so our first presenter for this segment is Mr. Kelvin Mulama. He's the CEO of Shop Okoa, which is a fintech that is based in Kenya and is also the third place winner for this year's AFI's 2025 Inclusive FinTech Showcase. We are thrilled to have him here with us today to showcase Shop Okoa's inspiring journey. Over to you, Kelvin.
Thank you very much, Vidya, and all the presenters that have made their presentations. So really amazing sessions to get to learn policy and how we're able to drive financial inclusion for people with disabilities. For accessibility purposes, I'm a bearded man in my late 20s, dark, and wearing a yellow t-shirt. I'm the founder and CEO of Shop Okoa, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. And we are leveraging our fintech technology to work with higher education institutions to digitize student welfare delivery support, especially for students with disability. And that means that they're able to get cash assistance program, meal subsidies, and essential items such as sanitary pads for women, so that they're able to have a good stay in school without having to worry about what they need. So I think you could please go to the next slide. Thank you very much. Yes. So Shop Okoa is the first of its kind in the model in Kenyan universities, especially when it comes to targeting the needs of the youth and the students, and more so importantly, targeting the needs of students with disabilities. And that means that we are contributing to the 1 billion people living with disabilities that are actually 15% which are not financially included. And that is what the kind of efforts that we are making as Shop Okoa. Next. Yeah. So basically, what really inspired us to come up with the solution, we realized that most students with disabilities were at risk of dropping out. For example, at Kenyatta University, where we did our first pilot, almost 30% of the students with disabilities were not finishing their full academic year, and close to 15% were dropping out. And one of the challenges that we're facing is, number one, we had this thing we call campus hunger. So worse that even students were boiling tea leaves to survive. And we realized that the universities didn't have that visibility and digitization to help out these students. And that's when we stepped in as Shop Okoa to tell the universities, okay, we can integrate our fintech with the student welfare offices and the student data, and we're able to map out all students with disabilities so that they can be able to access targeted support. Next slide. Yeah. And one of the things that we did to make this financial inclusion a success, we first introduced disability cards, whereby we issue both virtual and physical disability cards. And this caters for both students maybe who are the ones who are deaf, the ones who are blind, they're able to access this card. And through this card, the university can be able to give them meal subsidies. For example, in Kenya, we are doing for a monthly subsidy, we are doing up to $50 for each student, which is very useful, especially considering the income level of the students. Then this is accessible through our app, whereby they can use this card to pay for food, to buy groceries. And I'll show you how we've actually made it so easy for students who have mobility challenges to access even the groceries, the food items, close to their hostels, as compared to before, when Shop Okoa had not introduced such kind of inclusivity capacities to enable them be well served by the higher education institutions. Yes. So one of the things that we have done, we realize that students with mobility challenges, they have to go with the card maybe to the school mess, or maybe when they're going for shopping out, it becomes so hard. So what we've done, we've introduced smart dispensers close to their hostels. And this means that if you only have the card, you just go and tap that dispenser and you select what you need, if it's grocery, if it's packaged food. So we try to work with food that are not highly perishable, so that it's easier for them to cater maybe for their breakfast, for their lunch, and for their dinner as well. And we also work with the university restaurants so that they place the foods there based on the number of students, because now we have data to inform them that in this hostel we have this number of students with disability and their meal requirements are this amount of meals, so stock them inside the smart dispensers. And one of the things that was also a very success is the accessibility to sanitary pads, which we placed in dispensers in hostels for female students with disabilities. And it's really working out well to driving financial inclusion, because aside from just accessing the subsidies, we've seen the students now, they've started saving through the app. And that has shown actually promising that with this behavior, we could even increase accessibility to giving them access to credit. And also, we've ensured that for every student that has the card, they don't need to pay tax because they are not allowed to pay tax. So that visibility has actually ensured that the tax exempt benefit, especially on VAT, is executed with visibility, and they're able to spend less on food because of our facility. Yes. So currently we are operating in Kenya. We've partnered with over 15 higher education, 15 universities in Nairobi, Kenya. We have issued over 43,000 virtual prepaid cards, and we've realized that 85% of the students that were at risk of dropping out or not completing their full year semester now can be able to access cash assistance and meal subsidies. And currently we are doing $50 a month for each student. And currently we've served over 3 million meals that have been subsidized. These are through our smart dispensers and the school dining facilities, and also shops and merchants that are near the universities. And for those who may be students who live outside universities, and they're able to we've been able to support up to 15,000 months over the last 24 months. We've been able to support up to 15,000 cumulative. That's the whole number of students that we are supporting in terms of housing. And in terms of also access to healthcare, we've supported over 10,000 students to access emergency healthcare. And this has proved that actually students with disability can be financially included, and they can be part of the financial system so that they don't have to miss out on anything. And what we are saying is that through financial inclusion, we are giving them the power to go through university. So yeah, so that is my story about giving students with disabilities the power to go through university so that they can complete the education. And once they're done with school, they can carry forward their card and they can still advance with it into employment. And because they have this kind of empowerment, you realize that now they're able to finish school and they're able to stand on their own after they finish school. And that is the beauty of what you're doing. And I'm happy to be part of um, the initiatives that are ensuring that people with disabilities actually are financially included. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kelvin, for that very interesting presentation. Now, we are very happy to state that Latu is back after a bit of connectivity issues. So our second presenter, is Miss Latu Sarah. She is the Assistant Manager for Financial Inclusion and Market Conduct at the Reserve Bank of Fiji. We're very, very delighted to have her present and share Fiji's experiences with us today. So over to you, Latu.
You're muted, Latu. I don't know if you're speaking.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, sincere apologies, everyone. I've been trying, the connectivity is quite low at this time. It's almost 1 a.m. in Fiji. Nevertheless, I will jump straight into my presentation. So I'll briefly go through what I've been tasked to do. So financial inclusion for persons with disabilities in Fiji. Let me start with a brief context. Okay, I think some of you may have been to Fiji already. It's a small island located in the South Pacific with land size slightly bigger than Hawaii and a population of around 917 people. So our close neighbors are Australia and New Zealand. We rely mainly on tourism and to a small extent agriculture. The financial sector is highly critical for our growth, with its assets accounting for around 2.5 times the size of the economy. Despite being a small country with a small population, our challenges are huge, like with the low growth and high costs, some huge vulnerabilities to natural disasters, and more importantly, the lack of capacity and limited access to financial resources, especially for persons with disabilities. But nevertheless, overall, the nation has reached out to around 40,000 persons with disabilities through targeted programs. Next slide, please. Thank you. As for the Reserve Bank of Fiji, we have just started our journey, delving deeper into this space, especially with our national financial inclusion, the third strategy, where we have a dedicated strategic commitment towards targeted or vulnerable segments, such as persons with disabilities. So it's quite an exciting journey for us. So the third NFI started in 2022. We are now into 2025 midterm review. So the specific target for PWDs come under inclusive finance pillar. And for that, we are looking at developing inclusive policies and guidelines. So via collaborations with key stakeholders, such as the Pacific Disability Forum. So these efforts are globally aligned with SDG, as some of you are aware of, with SDG 1 and SDG number 10. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, under inclusive finance pillar, it is really quite emotional, as well as a stepping stone for us, when our chair for our financial inclusion task force mentioned that no one should be left behind, especially our targeted segments such as PWDs. So under the core inclusive finance pillar, this comes under strategic action 1.4, where we're trying to develop affordable, appropriate financial products and services to mitigate shocks and build resilience to the adverse impacts of climate change. So more specifically, we are trying to start off by designing approaches to reduce barriers to accessing financial services for specific target groups. In other words, trying to develop a toolkit for financial service providers, commercial banks, insurance companies, and so on and so forth, so that how could they reach out, what kind of conditions could be developed or used so that they could better serve persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. As I had mentioned earlier at the start of my presentation, so this is like one of our earlier journeys. We are trying to work together with the Pacific Disability Forum, also aligning with national policies as on the screen. There's one in particular that we have there on Women Economic Empowerment Action Plan. This is also one of the new initiatives that we are working on. Disabilities, including for women, MSMEs, and so on. and the others are the initiative
Sorry, Latu, we lost you a little bit. I'm not too sure if you can hear me. Okay, yes. Thank you. Yeah, Latu has dropped out. I think the connection where she's at is a little bit tricky. So perhaps we can give her a minute. Let's see if she comes back. But if not, then we can maybe move on. Okay, let's move on. Lucy, if you don't mind. Lucy is doing an excellent job at managing the slides today. Thank you so much. All right, we're actually going to move on now to our final segment for the day. So this is where, this is the peer-to-peer session, essentially, which is on lived experiences, barriers, and solutions. Our moderator for the session is Ms. Alison Thornburn, who is also the co-founder of the Barrier-Free Finance Initiative. We're very much honored to have her guiding today's discussion. Over to you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Vidya, and hello, everybody. As Vidya said, my name is Alison Thornburn, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Barrier-Free Finance Initiative, along with Paul. So I'm a middle-aged, I guess, white woman with short light brown hair, and I'm wearing a black and white patterned dress today. So it's really fantastic to meet you all on the call today, and just to see the level of interest and commitment to disability inclusion amongst AFI members. And I'm particularly excited to be moderating this session, as we're very privileged to be joined by three outstanding international advocates for disability rights and equality. So you can see on the screen there, so that's Morgan Mazet, Chrissy Bister, and Nay Samit, and we'll be introducing all of those later on. It's, you know, this to me is such a great opportunity to hear firsthand about the challenges that people with disabilities face to access and use financial services. And to actually, as Paul said earlier, you know, one of the issues is that there's very limited contact often between the financial sector and the disability sector. So it's really great to come together today and have the opportunity to discuss and debate together, to hear what the problems are and to talk about the solutions. So just to talk about the format of this session, so we're going to start by having a short presentation, about 5 to 10 minutes, from each of our three guest speakers. And I'll then invite two AFI members to respond to the points that they've raised. Mamsa Odoro Frimpong from the Bank of Ghana and Khaled Bassioni from Bank of Egypt, who have both recently implemented regulatory frameworks for disability inclusive financial services. And after that, we'll then open the floor for a general discussion for everybody to participate. So if you do have specific questions that you'd like to ask during the presentation, please feel free to share those in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we ask those questions during the general discussion session. Okay, so to start, I'd like first of all to introduce our first guest speaker, Morgan, who comes from Jakarta in Indonesia. So Morgan is an entrepreneur and self-advocate who has championed the rights of people with intellectual disabilities, both nationally and internationally, including at forums such as the United Nations and the Global Disability Summit. Along with his mother, Debbie, who is also here today, Morgan formed Let's Speak Up, which is a support and advocacy group for young people with Down syndrome. And his work has been featured in a global publication by Oxfam called Narrative Power and Collective Action. So Morgan, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Many thanks for joining us today. And please share your presentation with us.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
Life experiences, barriers, and challenges in accessible banking services for persons with disabilities in Indonesia. Selamat malam, Ibu dan Bapak. Bonsoir, Mesdames et Messieurs. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity given to me to speak in this forum. I'm Morgan Malte, a person with Down syndrome. I am 26 years young. I have glasses. My hair is black. I am wearing a black and white checkered shirt. And I am not that extra handsome. I'm an international self-advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities. I am also an entrepreneur in food and beverage sector. Person with Down syndrome is categorized as person with disability. We have an extra chromosome. We contain since birth. We might have more time to learn something. So please be patient. We are no less or more than you. It is just written differently. You know that law in Indonesia has severely discriminated against us. Indonesia has the first CRPD since 2011, and in 2016 it has passed a law on protection of the person with disabilities rights. Majesty considered us as person with no legal capacity or even no capacity at all. Indonesian society still considers us incapable, stupid, a burden to our families and the country. Therefore, we are considered only for quality education, like employment. We were even denied admission to public schools. I mentioned how can we find jobs, but I'm here now to prove that we too can be educated, can work, and surely we have talents. No one would think that I, who was born with Down syndrome, would be able to speak, read, and work. I can speak three languages: Indonesian, French, and English. I am the first Asian person with Down syndrome to speak in front of the therapeutic community in Geneva. There I speak about the world of work for people with Down syndrome in Indonesia. Due to my advocacy work in the Down syndrome movement since 2019, I have then become known. Last April, I presented a research on health services at the Global Disability Summit in Berlin with Down Syndrome International. Just last month, I returned from attending the World Inclusion International Congress in Sharjah. There I was asked to represent South Africa from the Asia Pacific region. I have been invited to speak at the event both in Indonesia and abroad, online and offline. I was contracted to work by international organizations such as Inclusion International, Down Syndrome International, One Woman, and DDB Global. I am now working with the former organization since 2020. The local organization hired me to peer review their books or documents in easy read. And those was paying me money, but where I can save my money that I earn. What my country does to me, my rights are denied. The worst part is that I am considered to lack of legal capacity. To this day, children and adults with disabilities are discriminated against in all areas, from health, education to employment. The most interesting consequence I continue to experience is that I cannot open a bank account in my own name, let alone to get a loan to advance my F&B business. I hope I'm speaking in the right forum. I've been advocating for the issue for some time. A video in which I expressed my concern was screened at the opening of the World Justice Forum in The Hague 2022. Last month, I brought this issue up at a public opinion meeting in the House of Representatives of Indonesia. So please, ladies and gentlemen, help us to advocate this issue to the Indonesian government. I have proven my capacity, and many of my friends have also proven that we too can be educated, can invest like others, can achieve success, have the motivation, and we too can work like others if given the opportunity. Do not discriminate us no more in essential banking services. With simple things we can do to promote the fulfillment of disability rights in everyday life. Acceptance that we are part of the human diversity, so we have the same rights as anyone. Do not challenge us. We are all human, yet we are all unique. To listen, include, and respect us. If you have any questions, I have here my home dairy just in case. Last but not least, if you happen to come to Jakarta, do visit my pretty restaurant, Morgan's Kitchen. Thank you. Terima kasih. Merci.
Thank you very much, Morgan, for that great presentation and raising this really important issue in financial exclusion and making the case so clearly and powerfully for equal access to financial services for people with intellectual disabilities. Thank you so much. And your restaurant sounds great, so I hope to get there if I go to Jakarta.
Yeah, yes, please.
So thank you again, Morgan. And now I'd like to turn to our second guest speaker, is May Sumit from Cambodia. So Sumit is a leading, oh, I'm sorry, did we Did we miss out Chrissy? Yes, we did. Apologies for that. So no, we'll turn to our second guest speaker, who is Chrissy Bizda, who is from the Philippines. So Chrissy is an HR professional and disability rights and inclusion advocate with 21 years of experience spanning human resources, organizational development, and gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, or GEDSI. She has conducted multiple consultancies for government, corporate, and development actors. She's advocated for gender and disability equality at regional and international forums, and she's co-founded 2 enterprises promoting disability inclusion. Her many achievements as a leader, advocate, and changemaker have been celebrated in a book entitled Trailblazing and Transforming: Success Stories of Entrepreneurs with Disability. Chrissy, it's a real pleasure to have you on the call with us, and I'll now hand the floor over to you to share your experiences and thoughts with us.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, or good noon to everyone. Am I clear?
Yes, very clear. That's
All right.
great.
Thank you so much for inviting me in this wonderful occasion, because I'm really, really happy to share with everyone, especially that I'm very aware that our participants came from different banks. And I'd like to share with you the unique experience of people with visual disabilities, both for those with low vision and those who with total blindness. So I believe that there's a lot of discrimination and barriers when it comes to banking for persons with disabilities. Um, but for the blind side, I just like to inform everyone that our lived experience is really horrible. And when I say horrible, it's really painful. It's really offensive. And I'm not exempted into this. Having a visual disability is um is something that really kept me grounded, because I experienced what other experience also. So for example, when I was applying for or getting myself a bank account for personal savings, I experienced multiple discrimination, because I was categorically um classified as an illiterate person. And this is something that really offended me, because I know myself that I'm not an illiterate person. I can read, I can write, maybe not through my eyes, but I can read and write through other means. And I wasn't born blind, and I lost my vision before college or entering college. So I'm able to write, I'm able to sign, and I still practice signing up to now. I sign my documents, I sign my contracts and everything. And every time I would update my signature in the bank, every time I would have bank transactions, um, it would always be like a battlefield for me. Because when I deal with bank people and bank employees, they would tell me, your signature is no longer looking similar to what you previously had. I would always have to assert myself and always tell them, of course, it would change over time, because right now I can't see anymore. So that would, some of the loops in my signature would change a bit. Um, and I think it's very natural that it would change over time. Another thing that I pointed out when I'm dealing with bank employees is that I also tell them that this is the reason why I am giving you my signature specimen in front of you. And I'm doing it 4 times, 5 times in front of you, because I want you to witness it, and I want you to see me, that it's really me signing the paper. It might sound petty for many of you that we have to fight over a perfect signature, but you know, that's one of the challenges we face when we're dealing with the banks. Another is when I was getting myself a bank account for payroll, because um I used to teach. I'm a part-time professor in one of the universities here in my country. And when I was applying for a bank account for my payroll, they kept on asking me what's my job. And I told them I am a professor at the nearby university that is your partner for payroll. And then they said, how come? Or it's like they were wondering how I was able to get a job in that university. And like I told them, I got accepted for a professorial job, so I'm getting myself an account for my payroll. And they're gonna say, like, how did that happen? I mean, it's not your business to ask my employment journey with this university. My business here is to just apply for a for a bank account that's gonna be connected to my payroll. And then they said when they saw my application form, and then they said, "Oh, you're from the School of Commercial Law and you're gonna teach there. Are you a lawyer?" I said, "I'm not a lawyer, but I know my rights." I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer just to know your rights. And then they told me, if you cannot sign properly, we would not be able to open an account for you. And I told myself this is again the issue. I'm going to, to have arguments with the bank employee again. So I told her, if this is the case, I would like you to speak to the vice president of our School of Commercial Law, and please tell him, document your concern that you're not allowing me to have a bank account because of this imperfect signature that I'm doing in front of you, and state your reason why you're not allowing me. I think she was shocked about my suggestion because I was putting her on the line. It's because I think that's the best way for me to settle the situation, because I think there's no point in explaining things to this person if she wouldn't listen, and if she's just interested to gossip about my work instead of assisting me how to open a bank account for my payroll. Not just that, we also experience digital inaccessibility when we talk about mobile banking. um yeah, so there's a lot of that issues in my country. I believe it's also an issue in other countries here, but in particular in my country, it's really a big issue, especially with the top banks in our country. The top four or the top five bank, they all have digital inaccessibilities, which is really making it difficult for us to manage our finances. And lastly, this is one of the um most offensive that I and my fellow with disabilities experience from the bank is they do not allow blind people to have bank accounts. It's because they thought our we couldn't manage it by ourselves. We couldn't be independent in managing our finances, our withdrawals and everything. I mean, I appreciate the thought or being thoughtful about it. However, however, that's crossing the line, and that's very offensive, because how I mean, they are trying to put a connection between blindness and independence. They're putting connection between blindness and having the ability to understand your finances and manage your finances. In fact, they are forcing us to have someone to join with the bank account. What they don't know about it is when they push someone to be a joiner or to be a co-owner of a bank account, that's even more dangerous, because um I think what they have in mind is a very sweeping perspective, or an idea that when you're co-owning the account with a family member or with a friend, they thought it's going to be even safer for us. They don't know that it's actually the opposite, because even family members can actually steal your money. So I mean, of course, it's not always true in other cases or in other families, but we have to be open to that idea that even family members must not have access or direct access to your bank account. It should be just you and you managing it. Anyway, we have proven ourselves time and time and again that we can actually um, manage it ourselves. So for me, one of the things that is very important in banking, in regulatory policies, is also to fix the perceptions and attitudes of bank employees, because this is one of the things that really impede us to independently manage our finances or even access banking products. Um, Another thing also is the 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 processes and policies of as to how things are done in the bank. So if you do not have a digital copy of the contract, how can we actually read it by ourselves? Since bank employees would categorically tell us that we are quote unquote illiterate. So I think it's, it would be um, best that you have digital um, format of the contract so we can read it ourselves and read it directly, because we have assistive devices, we use voice over technology, we use screen readers to read things, maybe not through our eyes but through a different means. So that's still that is still us, meaning if we hear it through our screen readers, it's still us and we're still the one processing the information for ourselves. I mean, I could go on and on tonight to explain so much problems with banking. But yeah, I'd be happy to um to answer all of your questions later and present more problems and suggestions how to work out this um major problems and major barriers to persons with disabilities, especially for people with blindness in doing independent banking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chrissy, for sharing, your very personal experiences of trying to access financial services. And, that really brings home, I think, the point of the many different barriers and obstacles you've had to face to get this basic service. And the reality of the impact on you as a person with disabilities, with visual disabilities. So thank you so much for sharing those experiences. I think that's
You're welcome.
very illuminating. And I'd now like to introduce this.
Sorry, Alison. Paul has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Paul, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just very briefly. Kirsty, thank you so much for sharing that. It was very enlightening, and I think just to link this a bit with the work our participants and the regulators are doing today, and I think you very well mentioned this. Banks are process. It's just about processes, and I think this is where regulators have a real role to play so that they can have the means to change those processes. So you very well explain the issues of signature. I personally had exactly the same experience in Cambodia, so this is not only in your country. I think for regulators to give incentive guidance for banks to be able to for them to develop alternative channels, it's key. And just to link this personal experience, Kirsty, personal experience with concrete actions that you can take. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul, for making that point. As you say, I think it really reinforces some of the messages from your presentation, but in a very personal way, to hear about that impact on that Chrissy's told us, the impact on her as an individual. So thank you for that. And finally, I will now introduce our third speaker, May Sumit. So thank you for your patience, May Sumit. So Sumit is from Cambodia and is a leading disability advocate who's been an active contributor to the disability rights movement for almost 20 years, both in Cambodia and internationally. He's the founder and executive director of the Phnom Penh Center for Independent Living, PPCIL, an NGO, a Cambodian NGO founded in 2009, which received a prestigious Zero Project Award in 2019. And he's also a member of the Disability Action Council of Cambodia, which is the national body responsible for developing and coordinating the implementation of the National Disability Strategic Plan. So a very warm welcome to you, Sumit, and I invite you to share your presentation with us.
Yes, thank you, Alison. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all. Again, my name is Amit from Cambodia. For the accessibility purpose, I would like to describe myself. I am wearing a light blue shirt and having black hair, sitting on manual wheelchair in my home, and also wearing headphone connected to my laptop. My background is a blur with in my house, and behind me have a wall clock. So thank you very much for having me in this important peer-to-peer learning session. Thank you all for taking time to be here today. And thank you, BFFI and AFI, for giving me this great opportunity to be a part of this wonderful session. Before I go to the topic, let me introduce myself again. Of course, I am a person with disability, having diagnosed with polio at 8 months and starting using manual wheelchair at age 14. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Of course, in addition to my self, I also participate in what we call a Daskin Leadership Training Program in Japan in 2006 and 2007. And after I complete my training in Japan, I come back to my country, and then I establish my organization called PPCAL. So next, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce a short introductions of my organization. So next slide, please. Okay, thank you. My organization called PPCIL is a Cambodian organization of persons with disability, OPD, established in 2009, as Alison mentioned. It is the first center in Cambodia dedicated to promote independent living for persons with severe disability. PPCL is advocates for the shift from institutional care to community-based living through the flagship initiative, the Personal Assistance Service, which support individuals with conditions like polio, spinal cord injury, and cerebral palsy to live independently and participate equally in the society. PPCL engage in advocacy, lobbying for accessibility, and right with local and national level stakeholders such as university, airport, and private company. It also share knowledge with local authority and schools and establish the independent living group network to strengthen community-based support and advocacy for the rights of persons with disability. And as Alison mentioned, of course, my organization doing like a role model project on independent living and also provide a personal assistant. We also giving, we receiving the wonderful award from Zero Project in 2019. Next slide, please. So the next, I would like to share my experience in assessing financial service. Before that, I would like to inform you that in my presentation, sometimes I speak on behalf of persons with disability in general, as my problem also the same as other persons with disability. So I would like to share with you the challenges that I have been facing as follow. The general situations for persons with disability in Cambodia face barrier when trying to access financial services and products. So the challenges is contribute to a cycle of exclusion and poverty. Next slide, please. So the next, I would like to share the challenges that I have been faced. First, of course, low as a presentation of Paul as well. He talked about the low financial literacy. So regarding this, let me share with you about my case in 70 years ago. I remember that my first start using financial service in 1998, 27 years ago, that I loaned some money to scale up my business at that time, but I didn't realize deeply on what is the loan, such as like a loan interest, loan risk, and how to use the loan in the right way. So which means that I had low level of financial literacy because I didn't receive enough training on the finance management. And I'm sure that the large majority of persons with disability in Cambodia also having the same problem like me. And the second is I would like to share with you about the barriers in access in finance service. I have 4 points to share with you. The first is loan condition apply. Which means that, of course, every banks, they have their loan condition, but the problem is that the lack of information about loan. And most of banks are not providing the loan for persons with disability. If they accept to provide the loan for person with disability, they are required person without disability to stand on behalf or to stand instead of person with disability. It's meant to use the name of person without disability instead of people with disability. And unequal lending with others, including some points such as the loan amount for person with disability is lower or smaller than person without disability. And the bank require more collateral, related documentations, and the bank are require more involved person and also witnesses more than the borrower with disability. And the second is policy barriers. In Cambodia, the government is not yet making appropriate policy to facilitate and help persons with all kinds of disability with accessing to financial services. People with disability is still facing with some forms of discrimination because of lacking of understanding on disability from the financial institutions. And the third is about accessibility. The building construction does not have accessible ramps or making it accessible for persons with disability. The information counter are super high, super tall, and it's making difficult for persons with disability to communicate, asking for information, and cannot hear clearly while communicating with the bank officer while they are banking. And there is no accessible toilet in the bank office for persons with disability. And one more thing about the ATM room is narrow, inaccessible, and ATM machines are tall and high. So making it difficult for a person with wheelchair user to press on its screens to use the ATM machine. And there is no voice instruction as well as Braille for assisting person with visual impairment to use. And the last one is the communication, the fourth, yeah. The bank officer are lack of skill in communicating with person with disability, especially with person with hearing impairment. And I would like to share with you about the additional costs. Person with disability occur additional and necessary costs. For instance, when they go to the bank, so they need more cost for transportation, and of course, sometimes the healthcare assistive devices and personalized services as personal assistant service that can be significantly reduce their living standard. Due to complicated loan condition from bank that can make most people with disability to borrow money from informal financial place that also can make more financial risk in their family. And the last one is the socio-cultural barriers. Like a person with disability often face with economic exclusion and stigma, which can be compounded by not having independent incomes. So most persons with disability are lacking of independent income, and also they living depend on their family members. It leads to them being perceived like a burden or see disability not ability perception. So that this it's coming from their family and their community and resulting like the exclusion and dispersion. So next slide, please. So finally, I would like to share some of key solutions come up with the challenges. Of course, first, to provide easy loan condition for persons with disability. And the second is conduct the disability accessibility awareness for bank officer, and develop to increase develop policy to increase more opportunity for persons with disability to access financial services and products. The government should push the implementation of employment quota and encourage financial institutions have to employ persons with disability to work with their institutes. And the last one is we need the survey and collect data on the challenges faced by persons with disability. So yeah, that's all from me. So thank you very much for paying attention. And if you have questions, please ask me more. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Sumit. Thank you for that great presentation. I think, again, that's really valuable to get your perspectives, which really emphasize, I think, the multiple barriers that you and other people with disabilities face to access financial services, and also some of the particular and needs that people with disabilities have for financial in their financial situation. And also, it's very useful to get your suggestions for how to overcome those barriers, which I think is then leads really nicely into bringing in two of the members of AFI to respond to some of the points you've raised and also the points that Chrissy and Morgan raised in their presentations. So to do that, first of all, I'd like to call on Mama Sarr, who is the head of the Market Conduct Office for the Bank of Ghana. So Mama Sarr, welcome, and I'd like to ask you about what are your thoughts and responses to the issues that our three presenters have raised.
Thank you very much, Alison. It's great to see you again.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
For visibility purposes, I'd like to describe what I'm wearing today. So I have on a houndstooth black and gold dress today. I'm an African woman, a middle-aged lady with spectacles. I wear spectacles, dark skinned, and as I said, I have on a houndstooth dress today. So it's very interesting what we have shared. We've listened about the difficulties that our contemporaries, our colleagues are facing when it comes to accessing financial products and services. One interesting thing that Bank of Ghana did at the inception was to engage federations for people with disabilities and participants, individuals, through GIZ programs to actually discuss difficulties faced by our colleagues in various ways. So people with visual impairment, hearing impairment, mobility impairment, and they shared their challenges. And we also looked at a wide spectrum of customers. So we looked at people with disabilities from the academic sector, as lecturers, as students, entrepreneurs with disabilities, public servants, and all that. So we're able to have a very good idea what the challenges were. Then we went on to assess the framework that we have as a country. So we looked at the existing laws, we looked at the gaps that those laws don't address. Then proceeding from that, we went on to put together initial drafts and went back to the federations that represent people with disabilities to look at the documents. After a number of engagements, both internal and external engagements and peer review sessions with other international bodies, we came back with the final draft for them to look through clause by clause. And I remember one interesting clause we're trying to protect, in inverted commas, people with disabilities, especially visual impairment. So we wanted to put in a clause that says that for some services, if the service provider feels that they can't protect them from some kind of risk, they should elect not to provide that service. And we had a student who had visual impairments, but is very interested in, he's actually developed an app that can even help people with visual impairments interact with ATMs without actually having to key in their numbers with a pad. So he said, no, there are certain services I would like to take the risk to do it, maybe with somebody I can trust assisting me. So put in a clause that says that I can elect to actually access that service, and I can elect to have somebody assist me through it. And if the bank or financial service provider has any trained person to assist further, then they can go ahead. So I think with that kind of consultative process for developing legislation, you are able to actually get legislation that is all inclusive and also has their buy-in of the end users. So for our contemporaries that shared their experiences, for example, so when it comes to somebody with Down syndrome, it would be a good thing to actually give that person the option to choose to have a guardian jointly open their accounts. But that solution will not be an accurate solution for a person with visual impairment who has the ability to do all these things, take independent decisions, and then you ask that person to open an account with somebody just because the person has visual impairment. So that solution would not be a good solution for somebody with visual impairment. Actually, when the presenter was sharing, the one with visual impairment, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. It reminded me of our initial consultation that we had through GIZ. And there was one particular case of a university lecturer who went to the banking hall to make a withdrawal. And the teller was so prejudiced. He went with an aide, somebody, actually a Bolt driver. He let him assist him into the banking hall. The teller was more comfortable counting the customer's money and handing it over to the person who is visually abled just because he's visually abled. And this was a total stranger. So bringing out those challenges in that forum where, and I always use it as an example when I'm engaging the financial service providers to make them aware of how sometimes these prejudices can make us behave very unreasonably towards our customers. And throughout our engagements, Ghana is at the stage of actually ensuring that the banks and other financial service providers put in place a framework to implement the directive that was issued. So we've broken down the various aspects of it, and we did it together with the service providers. And interestingly, we had a representative, a participant from one of the very big banks who was visually impaired. So he sat in quietly as others said, oh, we need more time to meet this KPI. And then he came in, and with his personal experience, because he was not originally visually impaired, he was a banker who became visually impaired in the course of time. So with that sensitivity, he was able to drive the implementation framework to a shorter time frame, because then they saw this is one of our colleagues and it is very close to us, and it is possible that we can end up even in that way. So I think when we engage the end users at the initial stage of developing the laws, it really helps. It promotes inclusivity, it promotes accessibility, it promotes transparency and accountability. Now, we had persons with disability at the inception, at the point of developing the guideline, the directive, and we had people with disabilities at the point of trying to implement. And so at every stage, they are represented, and you become very sensitive to how you should actually disseminate your products and services. And in engaging the banks and other financial service providers, I always encourage them to look at the opportunities. For instance, if you develop a product like the one that was showcased, that would help students. Ghana has a growing population of students with disability, visual impairments, various disabilities, who are now pursuing higher education to the university level. So if you develop a product that is going to help them, not only will you be able to capture them as your customers at the beginning of their adult lives, but they are likely to stay with you through their working lives. So I like to project the opportunities that are available for engaging this customer base by highlighting the percentage of customers or population in Ghana that are visually impaired, hearing impaired, people with disabilities, and the various sectors that they are engaged in, and the opportunities that they present as potential customers. And it has always been a good thing to attract the financial service providers to do the right thing. And going forward, they know that we will publish to the public for them to know the available services that the various banks and service providers offer. And so it will be a way of information and an indirect way of advertising for them. So I know with this, by the next time we meet, we would have a positive result even to announce. And when it comes to data gathering, we have put it in our directive requiring every service provider to gather data with the permission of customers who have disabilities and begin to tailor products and services to suit them. So I believe after a period of time, they will be able to gather that and also gather some data from the various federations that represent people with disability to enable us, even as a banking sector, to be more intentional and specific when it comes to product and service delivery. And I think such an approach is something that really would promote the inclusive banking for people with disabilities. Thank you very much. I would also love to hear from other people what they are doing, learn from other people, especially from the fintech companies. We have gotten to the stage that we need to be able to get something to help the community banks to also roll out disability-friendly products and service, and that's the stage which we've got into. So I'll be very happy to hear from other participants how we can advance that course. Thank you very much for the opportunity. If there are any questions, I'd like to take them.
Thank you so much, Mamisa, for that very comprehensive explanation of the steps that you took at Bank of Ghana, and I think some of those key messages coming out there about, you know, the participation of the end users and engagement at every stage in the process, and, you know, building that awareness and countering those prejudice and discrimination are very key points. And I'd like to get the perspective now of Khaled, who's the General Manager for the Financial Inclusion Department of the Central Bank of Egypt. Khaled, what perspectives can you share relating to the points that were raised by our speakers today?
Thank you, Alison, for the introduction. I would like to greet everyone on this very important event to me. Listening to the difficulties and the problems is crucial to the regulators. Let me introduce first myself. I'm Khaled Basyouni, Head of Inclusion Department at the Central Bank of Egypt. I come from the land of pharaohs, Egypt, so I'm a little bit brownish with eyeglasses because I cannot see really well, so I have to wear my glasses. I'm wearing a blue suit with light blue shirt and a tie, a blue tie, a dark blue tie with the strips that is greenish and light blue. Without any further ado, I'm sitting in my office. I'm surrounded with glass windows that are the walls of my office. People with disabilities regulations that the Central Bank of Egypt have issued is one of those major milestones that we have undertaken during the last period of time. When we started doing that, we had to meet with everyone, with all 360 degrees stakeholders who are engaged and involved around the difficulties that people with disabilities are encountering. And of course, one of the major stakeholders were the people with disabilities themselves. So we started with the laws. And having said that, I want to just give a little bit of an introduction to everyone in this call, that we have to differentiate and understand that there are the government laws and there are bank regulations and policies. The bank regulations and policies have to comply with the laws of the country, of course. So there are things that are within the hands of the regulator of the banking sector, which are the bank regulations and policies, while those where we do not have any hand over are the government laws. And when we first investigated the laws to understand what we are able to accommodate and what we are not able to accommodate, what we are able to change and what we are not able to change, we had to first understand the laws very well and read them very carefully. So for instance, it is by law that difficulties such as syndrome has to have a guardian. It's not for us as a banking sector or as a regulator to change that unless the law is changed. So those are the concerns that goes with the policies and goes with the regulations. Anything that is complying with the with the laws, then it is able and capable, the regulator, to set policies around them. So we read the laws. We met with ministries that are involved and responsible for people with disabilities. We've met with people with disabilities, and we segmented the 3 different types of disabilities to understand each and every disability with its own difficulties and their own needs. And I have to tell Morgan, Prissy, and Samith that lots of the obstacles mentioned today were mentioned to us during our meetings with them. And one of the major things was, as expressed by Prissy, having a family member come with us and to have not a joint account, but to supervise the account of the person with disability, him, herself. So we have understood the difficulties and the barriers, and then we checked the status and the regulations and the practices of the banks to identify the gaps between those difficulties and the needs where we wish to achieve, and the current status at the banking sector, and the gap between both of them was really huge. I have to admit that. So we've differentiated the disabilities, and then we've conquered those disabilities with some regulations that can facilitate the banking services to each and every type of a disability. So for visual impairment, we've set regulations to have all bank applications in Braille language. We have admitted the stamp and fingerprint instead of signage. We have regulated all kinds of internet banking to be a voice over and having an IVR system, even the ATM machines. We've allowed, of course, the internet banking in the first place. And then we've also took care of Prissy complaint and similar people in Egypt complain about having a family member to support and to assist with any financial transaction, by allowing the person with disability, him, herself, to request a support from the bank themselves, either a bank staff or any of the clients who are in the branch. And to assure transparency and safety of all parties, we have regulated to have this transaction recorded audio and video for documentation. For people with disabilities, we've seen lots of gaps started from the ramps, that bank branches didn't have any ramps for wheelchairs. Some bank branches, their doors were not allowing, if it is a round door, it does not allow wheelchairs to come inside the branch itself. And sometimes they are requested to go on 2 floors and there are steps. There are no elevators. So we have assured lots of things to be done for movement disability, starting from the ramps, the doors, the length and height of the ATM machine to be adequate for wheelchairs. Also, we have assured to have a special queuing system for all kinds of disabilities. We have assured to have a 1 window serving all kinds of services, bank services, to the types of people with disabilities. We have allowed home visits as well, so the branch can go to the home of the person with disability themselves. And I would I would certainly agree with Samith that financial literacy is hindering lots of things. But it's not only for people with disabilities, it's for the whole population. So financial literacy is crucial. It's elementary. But it's not only financial literacy that we need to work on. We need also to work on the awareness of people with disabilities with all of those services that they are present. So we're partnering, and we will continue in partnering with NGOs to spread the word. We have it on our website. We have it on the radios, on the TVs, all of those kinds of services, but we still need to do more. Accessing finance in Egypt is typically normal for normal people and people with disabilities. So if they meet the criteria and the requirements, then they are eligible. Nowadays, we have in Egypt several banks who are providing preferential interest rates, whether on saving products or on credit products dedicated to people with disabilities. I thank you very much. I don't want to exceed the time of the event, but I'm fully here for any question or suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Khalid. Again, a really comprehensive response there. And I think covering, a lot of the points that were raised there. And, in terms of, I think the point you raised is very valid about the need to look at the wider laws in the country as well as the banking regulations, particularly addressing the issues of legal capacity, which I think shows the need for that wider approach that Paul was talking about earlier to looking at the country assessment. I'm conscious that we are just at the end of the session, but we would like, if people can carry on, just to take a couple of points from the floor. I think Chrissy has raised a point that she'd like to just briefly come back to the points that were raised to our regulators. So maybe we'll start with that, Chrissy, if you just want to respond to those points.
Hello. All right. Sorry, I forgot to describe myself earlier. I'm wearing a headset. I have brown curly hair. My skin is a bit white, and I'm wearing a long sleeve floral blouse with shades of peach green and cream. So I'd just like to generally share with everyone about my reactions to the presenters. Well, not just the presenters, but I guess with all the thoughts that has been shared to all of us here. First, I'm very happy that persons with disabilities are being engaged and being consulted as um as part of the development of policies or new processes. I just want to emphasize also that um I do hope it's gonna be in a regular basis. It's because sometimes based on my ground experience as an advocate, we are only consulted and part of the discussion on the initial phase of the process. And when it reaches the monitoring and evaluation, how the process go, how the policy go, if it did well or did not go well, um, I think we are already out of the equation. So I guess it's a good point to share with everyone to be reminded of that. And also with digital accessibility, um, we have to always check with persons with disabilities about how it should be done. This is not because we're claiming to be perfect or all-knowing people. However, it is important that we are part of the dialogue especially when it comes to digital banking, how the apps are being developed. It's because for many experiences in the ground, they have already developed the banking app without the consultation, and the consultation happened after there has been a prototype developed, and that's going to be a waste of time, energy, and intelligence, because they could have corrected many things prior to the development if we were part of the initial discussion. And this going to save you money because this is also a business case. So for our banks here, um, if we are part of the process, especially in developing the banking apps, if we are part of it in the initial stage of the process, we can save you lots of money because there are wrong assumptions about voiceovers, about screen readers, about um having the banking app has its own voiceover, because usually it's the assumption. So we have to be um aware on these details, because um operating with merely assumptions would cost you a lot of money, instead of us helping you not just in the inclusion parts of the services process and the apps. We can also help you save lots of money if things are done correctly from the very beginning. Thank you.
Thanks, Chrissy. I think that's a great point about having the involvement of the end users right at the beginning and throughout, as Mami said herself, throughout at every stage in the process. And I think particularly for digital accessibility, that's a very hot topic at the moment that many banks are developing right now. So that's a really important point. Thank you. I think we had a hand up before from, is it Veronica from the Philippines?
That's right, Alison. Thank you.
Yes, hello, welcome. So yeah, please, I'm conscious of time, so if you can keep the points quite brief, but it would be great to hear from your question or comment.
Certainly. Thank you. And good evening, good day to everyone here. My name is Veronica Britannico. I'm an Asian with shoulder-length dark hair, fair skin, in my 30s, wearing a light blue blazer. My background features the logo of the Central Bank of the Philippines, where I work. So it's especially meaningful to hear from our experts from all over the world, especially from the ASEAN. So just two quick interjections on my end. One is a comment. On Chrissy's experience about visually impaired persons who are prohibited or excluded from having a bank account. Thank you, Chrissy, for sharing your experience. And I'm sure it was very frustrating and difficult at the time. And in fact, in 2021, the BSP released a memorandum to all BSP supervised financial institutions, sternly reminding them to adhere to laws and regulations against discriminatory practices towards persons with disabilities, including the non-acceptance of PWD identification cards and including turning away visually impaired persons. So what you experienced, Chrissy, it's very unfortunate, but this is very clearly against the BSP's guidelines. Thank you for sharing that. We will note this and we look forward to having further discussions with you on this as well. And then also another interjection on my end would be a question for our experts here, as well as our speakers who have lived experience as persons with disabilities. I am one myself. I have a physical disability, and as a policymaker specifically in financial services, we're very interested in hearing, so particularly for Chrissy, Samith, and Morgan, we're very curious, how would you compare your experiences using digital financial services like e-wallets or mobile money versus using traditional or face-to-face financial services? Do you prefer one over the other? And perhaps for Mamie and Khaled, if you can share a little bit about what changes or regulations and policies you've had in your respective jurisdictions to promote digital financial services for the sector. Thank you very much. If there's not enough time, even a written response would be wonderful. But thank you to AFI and to BFFI for organizing this.
Thanks so much for the question, Veronica. I think that's a great question in terms of and maybe let's address that to our speakers. If any of them would like to give a response to that, let's ask them first. So from Morgan, Sumit, or Chrissy, I think if you have any views about, I think Chrissy has given some views about accessing digital financial services. But just to give your perspectives about digital versus physical financial services and your experiences there. Sumit, would you like to give any perspective on that? I think you just unmuted. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And actually, talking about the e-wallet and any digital banking in Cambodia, actually now I'm the one of the user, the consumer that using the e-wallet, and also we have like the apps, bank apps that can access. But for me now, I can be use the e-wallet and also like some any other banks application. But for another people with disability who are living in the rural area, or people with disability cannot access to school, so they cannot read and write. So it's still difficult for them to use such e-wallet or bank application as well. So this is the situation in Cambodia. Yeah, thank you. Alison, please unmute, please.
About that. Yeah, so I think that's a great point to remember, that people with disabilities, are not a homogenous group, and it may work for some people with disabilities, but for others there are still barriers there. Chrissy or Morgan, would you like to add anything to that point around digital financial services or fintech projects, like wallet or prepaid? Anything to add? Okay, no worries. So so I'm just conscious of time. I don't know if we've got time.
Hello?
Vidya. Hello?
Yeah. Am I audible? Because I think I
Yes.
was speaking while on mute.
I'm sorry about that, Chrissy.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, very quickly, to respond to Miss Veronica's point earlier about wallets and digital banking, there are what we can call usable digital banks, which means that they are not fully accessible, but quite usable. So this means that it still give us barriers in fully maximizing the use of digital bank for all transactions that we need to do, like paying bills, transferring money, paying something, etc., etc. Um, One of the things that make it um, um, discri- um, discriminatory to its user would be when um, when they update the app, all accessibility features that it used to have were all gone. It's because there's no certain regulatory measure in the Philippines that actually guards all of these things. And we have also a memorandum from Department of ICT to make sure that all government agencies, regulatory or not, GOCC or not, should be following the World Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG, which is not even followed. And this is something that we have been monitoring in the Philippines. We have spoken directly to one of the major e-wallets. However, and unfortunately, they don't seem to see this as a human rights case. So even if we put it in a business case just for them to understand, they still not um pushing through with the reform or with the revision, because there are many things. I'd like to put this out to everyone. You know, the selfie feature with digital banks as part of security and safety for everyone. It's really good. It's really, really good. And it's not the problem at all. The problem is the process, because there should be an alternative process for people without eyes. Because when
Right.
we, yeah, for especially for those with artificial
Unable to
eyes,
link.
yeah,
Mhm.
especially with the artificial eyes, because when the app captures the face or the eyes, it's really more on the eyes. It's not really like the entire face. It's really more on the eyes from the retina or the iris of the person. So this is really a problem with those using artificial eyes, or those with permanently closed eyes, or those eyes without eyeballs. And that is a barrier for their financial independence, and also for those with amputated um hands, like no hands at all. um they should also have other means of doing banking, because they cannot sign for obvious reasons. They do not have fingerprints for obvious reasons. Um, so there. I mean, these are things that must be discussed, because it may sound little details, but these are important details that should be part of the conversation, the reform of the process and policies. Because I know that you have mentioned about the policy in 2021 about the financial inclusion policy. We're very glad about that policy. However, um, it's nice that you're here with us, because I'd like to directly inform you that the banks are not aware of this. It is just BSP who knows about the policy, and the banks are not completely aware of it. They have zero knowledge about this, because I have helped many fellow persons with disabilities who experience bank discriminations. We've been filing cases um, to your office, although it has been resolved. But as an advocate and as an organizational development practitioner, I think there's a better way of resolving the case, not by piecemeal. And yeah, that's all I can share. So there's a lot of things to still iron out. And thank you so much for making this public. Thank you, Afi.
Thanks, Chrissy. And thanks for raising those points. And I think there's been such a lot of good points come up here in this discussion. I think it's been so great to see the level of discussion here, and I wish we could go on longer, but I think we're going to have to close it off now. But rest assured, we have a lot of comments in the chat as well, and I'm sure I'm speaking a little bit for Vidya here, but we'll definitely follow up from this session and look at how we can take some of these points forward to ensure that this discussion moves on and develops further, basically. So really want to thank everybody for taking part in this session and contributing to what I think has been a really thought-provoking and illuminating discussion. Thanks in particular to Marmisa and Khalid for sharing their particular insights of what they've done in terms of creating regulatory frameworks. But most of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our three guests, Morgan, Chrissy, and Sumit, for taking the time to join us today, for sharing your very personal experiences, which I think has really brought home a lot of the points that need to be addressed. And I think everyone here will agree today that it has been an incredibly valuable experience to hear what you've got to say. So I hope we can create more opportunities for this type of dialogue and for taking forward the learnings and the information that you've given us today to build on those points, and ultimately to move forward with concrete actions to overcome the barriers that you've talked about that prevent people with disabilities from having equal access to financial services. So many, many thanks for coming here and giving us your insights and thoughts today. And now I'll hand back to Vidya to wrap up the session. Thanks very much to all.
Thank you so much, Alison, for your excellent moderation. I know that had so many different elements, so thank you so much for bringing this together in such a succinct manner. And of course, thank you to our speakers and our presenters. Okay, so now we've actually run slightly over time, and I do apologize for that, but I think the discussions were so interesting. So if you could just take 1 to 2 minutes to just scan the QR code on your screen. There's also a link that I will put in the chat for you right now in case you can't access it. Please feel free to give us your very honest feedback, and we will try to improve our events or try to run events such as this in the future. Thank you so much. We'll just keep this on the screen for about 2 minutes.
Thank you all.
Don't go away just yet. We have a picture to take before I forget. So we'll just give you 1 more minute, and then we're going to take a group photo. So do stick around.
The link is not working, Vidya.
Oh, it's not working?
No.
This event, the QR code, no? Try and see. Maybe remove the S in the. Okay, let me Okay, never mind, no worries. We will send an email for the evaluation to all participants in case you weren't able to scan it yet. Lucy, if you don't mind, just to stop sharing, and then we will quickly take a group photo. So if I could just ask everybody in this call to just quickly turn on your cameras. We'll just give you a couple of minutes. Turn it on. Don't be shy. Okay, everyone's ready? Big smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let me just go to the second page. 1, 2, 3. Smile. And the final page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We hope you had a good session, and we will hope to see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
bye.
everyone. Thank you, Vidya.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Thank
Afi.
you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.